Welcome back to CBS4K, and this is my Xcom tier list about how difficult missions will be in the game. This is for like new people who don't understand how dangerous they are, and this is like my tier list on how I feel like how dangerous the missions are. This is basically on based off of my own experience, what's most likely going to happen in those missions, how unpredictable those missions are, how those missions will have a tendency to sort of cascade into utter failure with slight mistakes or slight mess up in RNG, and which is something out of your control. Basically, this is basically a rough idea of what missions you might want to avoid. You might want to avoid at the beginning. Now, this is based off of the early game. I say the first few months of XCOM. And maybe even sort of in the mid game or late game. But not really a complete and overall of the entire game. Because I'm going to be honest with you, each of these missions, difficulties change drastically depending on what time in the game you get them. Like late game, some missions become easier. Also, some other missions become harder. Early game, a lot of missions are harder, but there's some that are just, I wouldn't say a cakewalk, but are easier. Now, with that out of the way, without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so we're going from the top all the way to the bottom. At the very tippy top, this is the most difficult mission, and at the bottom we have the easiest mission. So let's start from the top. Dreaded is basically incredibly difficult missions. These missions have a lot of RNG in them to make it go well, and especially in the early game. Again, we're focusing on the early game, maybe a little bit in the mid game, but I would say it would basically you have 4 people to work with when you do these missions. So I would say Dreaded is for people who are struggling. It's going to be a struggle for you. It's going to make your life. If you get a lot of these missions early on, you might want to restart your campaign. I don't know, maybe not. But yeah, for the most part, you'll be with 4 people. You won't have the best equipment. You'll have tier 1 tech for the most part. Maybe a little bit of tier 2 unlocked. But the reason why Dreaded is here is because it's essentially going to be a struggle for you, and you're going to have to be at your best. You're going to have to get some tips on how to deal with some of it. But for the most part, I think you can beat Dreaded missions if you know what you're doing and you have enough experience going in. Right after that is bad missions. Bad missions are tough. Almost as tough as Dreaded missions, but bad missions are what I like to call missions where you're guaranteed to have some problems. Where you're guaranteed to just go like, oh, that was a bad mission. I'm so glad I don't have to do another one of those for a while. Like a bad mission is something that can easily scale out of control for you, whether it's just a cascade of bad decisions, of bad RNG, and just make things a whole lot worse for you on the campaign map. Then the tough missions is that they're missions that are doable. They're very doable. All of them are doable, but I would consider this much more like you're not sitting there thinking you're going to fail at the very start of the mission. Like it's tough, but you can work with it. You can get to a sense of, all right, I've got control of this in the middle of the mission. Right behind that is easier missions. These are far simpler. They're less difficult. They're less problematic. They're less like, oh god, another one of these missions. It's less like that for you because easier mission basically means you're not going to struggle. You're not going to be as grumpy about it, but you can still have a bad, easier mission. You can still have a rougher one. And finally, at the bottom, Cakewalk. Cakewalk is self-explanatory. It's got few problems in it that will cause RNG to basically screw you over, but at the same time, it can still go bad. Now, all of this if I haven't said this, again, I'll say it once more. All of this is based off of my personal experience of what I've seen other players go through, and overall, the general idea I have of these missions and campaigns, sometimes they have little wonky things that makes things easier for you. Sometimes you get really good RNG, you may have a really good plan, and it switches them around a bit. And in a late game, things come in for a cycle, and some of these missions become really, really easy. So that's why I'm just going with the framework of early game, possibly mid game. Depends on the mission I'm looking at, but for the most part, there's some that just gonna have to be in the late game, like Advent Tower Network or a Psionic Portal. Like, we're gonna have to talk about that as a late game thing. So yeah, I think I'll start with the Guerrilla Ops. Okay, first one is Hack Workstation. Now, I'm going to say it's one of the easier missions. And the reason I say it's one of the easier missions is because you have a specialist. You should have a specialist unlocked at this point, and you should bring that specialist along. And if it's behind a wall or something, you should just blow up the wall and just scan it. I would say it's an easier mission, but I can see, like, if it's super early, it can be a tough mission. Because there's certain things that will have to be done in order to get to the workstation to hack it. Because it's something you have to get there, and it's a time limit. So time limits are always rough. So I'm going to put in tough mission, because it could have a moment where it goes completely and utterly wrong for you, depending on the spawn location, depending on where enemies are there. So yeah, so I'm going to say a tough mission. Destroy the alien relay. Believe it or not, it looks like a bad mission at start, but you can get there pretty quickly, and I actually consider it easier than the Hack the Workstation, because you should just use, you just have to commit 1 or 2 soldiers to blowing it up. And while this one has a specialist being the main person, and if sometimes you might not have a specialist, so it could come from an easier to a tough mission. So I'll say, like, this is an easier mission just because you can, like, anybody can do this, especially if you have like a skirmisher. If you have a skirmisher, oof, they take 2 shots at it, blow it up, or well, it's taking some more than 2 shots, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, in a couple of turns, you can have it blown up. The Hack Workstation, you have to get close if you don't have a specialist. And if you do have a specialist, you have to commit another character to throwing a grenade and blowing up the wall, or something like that. Like, there's a lot of things that can go wrong there, or the station could be destroyed. That is also a possibility. So yeah, you got to be careful with this. You got to be careful with that one. This one, you can make a few mistakes and get away with it. Protect the device. Ooh. This becomes a dreaded mission later on because more enemies do more damage. But this is like later on, like in late game. But early on, these are cakewalks. Like, you take your time with this one. There's no actual time limit. And if you cause enough ruckus and kill a bunch of them early on, you can make this an easy mission for yourself. You slowly approach from the other side of the map, or even if you're like on the other side of the map, if you slowly approach and just take out squad after squad, eventually you get to that last squad and it's just them, and they're focused on shooting at the device, at the resistance device. That is such a great boon to you, because they'll have to waste a turn shooting at that device. So you can take shots, you can get in there close. Like, the reason why a lot of these can go badly is because if like a large group congregates around that device, that's one of the ways it can go badly for you. But for the most part, it should be a cakewalk. Recover item. Again, it can be a tough mission depending on where the item is located, and if you don't have a specialist. It's kind of similar to Hack the Workstation. Sabotage the transmitter. Ooh, so basically you have to blow up like the transmitter, but you can slow it down by hitting the various buttons on the thing. Now, believe it or not, I consider that a bad mission. Not because it's super tough, it's because you have to constantly be moving your troops around, so you can't really bring that many snipers. You can only bring 1 or 2 snipers with you. Sorry, sharpshooters with a sniper specialist, but for the most part, yeah, I would consider it a bad mission because you can't. It really messes up your mobility. Like, I would say it's the weakest of the bad missions. Even in the late game, I consider it still kind of bad because you still gotta get in close to it and put the device on it. Like, there's some really chaotic moments in that mission. I don't know what it is. Like, it should be around in a tough mission, but there's so many bad missions that have resulted because of this that I have to put in the bed. Like, there's so many failed status black ones that, yeah, I have to put in there. Neutralize Field Commander. Dreaded. It's basically like destroy the device, but the device is mobile and can shoot back. That causes a lot of problems, and it takes a while to kill him because he's got a lot of health. So you can't just do like a few turns to get rid of him. You have to actually labor at destroying the guy, and he tries to run away a lot, so you're going to have to basically put all your resources into getting rid of him, and then leave yourself vulnerable to essentially the other squads, the enemy squad. Now, council mission. I don't know what. I'm trying to remember what a council mission is. I think this is like where you rescue a member of the resistance or something like that, or you bring in somebody who defected or something like that. I think it is a bad mission. I naturally put it there because. But having to escort someone can often end up badly if you don't know what you're doing. And yeah. We'll put this over here. Okay. Advent crate recovery. Oh yeah. I thought that was like something else, but okay. So let's look at the various. These two ways to get supplies: supply raid and enemy crate recovery. I consider this a bad mission. Oh, actually, a dreaded mission. The reason I consider a dreaded mission, I actually consider this worse. The reason I consider the recover advent crates a dread mission is because those can often wind up with you getting nothing if you're not careful. Because the crates go away 2 at a time. I think 2 at a time. You lose 2 at a time, so you gotta move with that one, especially after you've been exposed. And sometimes they put the crates in a weird spot, and it can go from like, oh, this isn't so bad, to, oh my goodness, we're gonna get nothing out of it, and half the squad got killed. It can be a really downer one. It can even, I think it's ended a few of my campaigns, like these missions. Like, wow, some of these are bad. But yeah, supply raid is a tough mission, but for the most part you can get past it, because actually I consider it an easier mission because all you have to do is not blow up certain things or certain areas and you should be fine. So yeah, that one is tough. Well, this one's a lot more dangerous. I consider it a little bit less. Yeah, okay. So again, from left is the hardest, right is the easier. Okay. But yeah, I consider supply mission, supply raids not that bad because let's be honest. Let's be honest with this. Supply raids. I mean, which one is the left is the easiest or right is the hardest? Oof. You know what? Let's go with left is the easiest and right is the harder. I think the crates are worse because you can't. Yeah, you got to get resources and. Like the commander becomes easier as after the first month. If it's the first month and you get that, you're kind of like, but after that, it becomes easier. Supply raids, I consider that tough in certain ways because you have to avoid exploding it. But at the same time, I consider it simpler than just wipe out all the enemies. That's just like a simple task to do. It's not that complicated. It's not that many holes in the plan that arise because of various other outside factors of destroying all the enemies. So yeah, it's right there. Resistance ops. Yeah, resistance ops, I think, are basically you just go on a resistance mission where you recover a resistance. Like, I think it's in the early game where it has something to do with the lost surrounding that dude and you have to rescue him. I think they're very early on things that you have to worry about. Like, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's about getting people away from the lost. Or they get trapped, like recovering an operative, like something like that. Those are tough missions because you don't have a lot of resources to work with. And you gotta, again, it's sort of like an escort mission. Escort missions are always rough to me. I would consider a little bit more, yeah, this is a bad mission. It can be a bad mission for you. Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about landed UFOs. Landed UFOs is basically another supply mission. But I think it can be a little bit worse because you got to take out that beacon before it goes off. It depends on who you get showing up. It might be something worse, but it won't be that bad. Like, it won't be that bad. Like, in fact, yeah, consider it behind all that other stuff. You're good. You're good. Let's see. Advent Retaliation and Advent Haven Retaliation. Okay. Advent Retaliation Assault. I think that's just where you get where they just attack your base, where they just attack the Haven, and you don't have guards. The one with guards, that are for you, that are Advent Haven Retaliation, I think those are where you get guards and you get people who shoot back. The Retaliation one, the Advent Haven Retaliation one is easier. The Advent Assault one, I consider that a dreaded mission because that can go pretty badly, especially early on. You don't have that much to work with. This one, where you have people who can shoot back and help you, that can still be a tough mission, but I consider it an easier mission because you have backup in the form of other resistance fighters. They'll do like 4 or 5. They won't do like 10 damage or nothing. They'll do like 2 or 3 damage points, but that's enough to sort of whittle somebody down over the course of turns. It'll make your life a little bit easier. I'll put it to you like that. But you can still have things go crazy wrong. So I'll give it a little bit, like, it's in a tougher range. It's in a slightly tougher range. Let's see. Okay, Rescue Captive Soldier. I've only had to do this a couple of times, so I'm not a real expert on it. So I'll just say it can be a tough mission because you're limited to like 3 troops, but you don't have to kill anybody. You can just get in there, get out. It's one of those that's like, yeah, it's rough, but if you know what you're doing, you're fine.
Covert Op, Guerrilla Op, what is it? Covert Op, Ambush. Okay. Covert Op, Ambush. I consider that a bad mission. But it's still doable in that it's not so rough. Because you're almost never expecting it. And when it does happen, you're just like, oh, God. I have to stop everything and focus on that. And things can go badly, and it depends on what your setup is. For the most part, I don't even put good weapons on my guys. I kind of just like, yeah, whatever, you'll figure it out. And it's like, oh no, I did not prep them, and there's loss there. There's alien avid troopers there. There's special, and sometimes the aliens start to pop up in them in later, later missions in the late campaign. So you got to keep that in mind. Okay, now I think we're down to the story mission. Oh, defense and chosen assault. Okay, it's chosen stronghold, and these are like mostly, yeah. Facility assault and black site. Let's look at the black site first. Black site ones are what you have to do in order to keep the game going sometimes, because you need to knock down that advent meter down. You need to knock that meter down. The game ending meter, you need to knock that down. So in order to do that, I would recommend you do those as quick as you could. But again, it's one of those tough missions. Advent facility assault. It can be a bad mission. In fact, it can be the mission that ends your campaign. So let's put that in the dreaded one, because you need equipment for that. You need equipment, and you need like a squad size at max level, I think. Maybe? I don't know. I think you can get away with 5. It depends on, but it scales with you, so keep that in mind. Okay, I've never done a chosen assault. So by the fact of me never having to do it, I will say it is a dreaded mission, because I have avoided that successfully. Advent Defense, Avengers Defense. I consider that a bad mission. I've lost campaigns because of Advent Defense. Like, I consider it once they get on the Avenger thing, and you can reload and try again, but I just consider the mission I've lost the entire campaign if they do that, because I don't have the troops to stop it. Like, yeah, you can go back earlier. I think and it's on Iron Man. Like, no, I will fully commit to we lost if we can't hold the defense mission, and the defense mission you can't lose. So because it's me, I'm putting in dreaded. I'm putting it a little bit higher than the chosen assault, because I don't have any reference with chosen assault, so I can't really say how bad it is. So okay. Chosen Stronghold. This is only the last one we can pick. This is all like in the mid game, and you have to do well in this. You have to do well. So I put that again as Reddit. You cannot do poorly. If you do poorly, you can never do it again in a campaign, and that squad you sent there is dead. Those resources you spent on that squad are gone. Everything is worse if you fail this mission, so do not fail it. It is a do not fail. It has to succeed. That's why I put it on dreaded. I think I like the idea of dreaded being like full up like this, because Xcom is that game. And this is a good sign of a good game, right, guys? It's like the easier missions are way at the bottom. There's few of them. There's so few of them. Yeah. Okay, let's look at Forge Facility. I consider, depends on when you are. This is the first time you fight a sectopod, so it's like a late game thing. But at that time, you got it. You got it. You are the boss at that point. So the sectopod is scary, yes, but you should be able to fight a sectopod the time you get there. Psionic Portal. A lot of crystals there, but you should be able to fight it. Like, I'll put it under easier. Like, also, there's the Gatekeeper. He's tougher than the Sectopod, but not by much. I always have an easier time taking out the Gatekeeper than the Sectopod. I think it's because the Sectopod is much more... I don't know, it's much more intimidating, the Sectopod. The Gatekeeper feels scary, but the Gatekeeper's like, oh, it's just a Gatekeeper. Ain't that guy? Yeah. I have no problem. Okay, Advent Network Tower. This can be a little bit of a goofy or a crazy mission. So I'll put that really here on the tougher missions, but you should be able to do this mission at that point. It's so late in the game. You got the equipment, you got the weapons, you got the know-how, you got the touch. But you gotta be careful. And Assault, the Advent Fortress Assault. Believe it or not, I don't consider it one of the dreaded missions because at this point, you should be able to handle this mission. You have all the resources. You have prep for it. You understand what you need to do. And it shouldn't be that much of a hang-up for you. And if you do have problems with that sort of mission, then check out my channel, see if there's a video you like. And I'll show you some tips and tricks by playing the game. I also have another tier list on here, so if you subscribe to my channel, you'll probably see some stuff about Xcom 2. I've been moving a little bit away from it, mostly because there's not many updates to it. I can probably do mods for it, but I'm not really sure I want to do mods, because mods are like a whole can of worms onto themselves. People have told me to do Long War. The problem with Long War is that it's long. I don't know if I want to commit to that, because if I commit to Long War, I'm going to be here for months and months. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I have a sort of like a sense of like, I don't want to keep doing this. I want to do something else when I play a game for a long period of time. Like, I want to do another thing. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to play this other game. Like, I have sort of like, yeah, this game's fun, but I want to do something else. Like, I have a tendency to want to move on to another game if a game drags on for too long. And Long War drags things on for too long. But I digress. That's more of a me problem than a you problem. So if you like this content, hit the like button. If you want to help support the channel, then don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button. And share it on your favorite form of social media. Helping me grow this channel and get to 500 to 1,000 will help it out significantly. Once you get into the thousands, you start to become a real YouTube channel, in my mind. Once you get to 1,000, you become a real YouTube. You're no longer this like, oh, I'm just this goofy guy doing stuff on the internet. Woo, boo, 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 boo. Now, once you get to 1,000, you become a real YouTuber. And I'm not there yet. If you want to help me get there, then you know what to do. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'll catch you in the next one.